banging your head against a brick wall, your head starts to hurt. That's Paps Shaikh, a CRO and Commercial Director with some serious credibility and growth, having helped a company which is now a unicorn scale internationally.
It really worked. So the business for Nextdoor here took off with mid-market. I went after broadband businesses. Just feel so blessed that I have built some amazing teams. And these teams are now friends.
I quizzed him on everything that founders need to know about growth, and he shared some great tips.
And what this is just lateral thinking. Where else might we get some money? The horses that you really believe are going to win the race.
And how do you deal with situations when the money is tough?
Don't go and spend your early stage funding on nice to have stuff.
It's a tough market out there, but Paps, from his decades of experience, has learned the timeless principles that keep being applied over and over again.
I help tech businesses grow.
With all your vast experience, can you tell us a bit about when people are really struggling at the beginning to find the right customer and making sure that they're going after the right people? How can they go about making sure that is the right customer to serve?
I mean, I'm going to say it's a good question, right? Because I think any startup will come across this at some point in the timeline. One typically has an idea of who the customers might be, and things change. Things change purely because by the time you've got a product or your service which is ready, you may well then go and test it out. So you may have an idea of client X within a certain segment being the right one, but you get this feedback and then you sit there and you kind of analyze it and you think to yourself, actually, I'm not getting the right signals back. And at that point, I think it's really, really important where you just got to sit. You just got to sit and take a hot minute and think to yourself, actually, maybe this isn't the right segment. I think it's probably best if I use an example of where I've had to do that. So Nextdoor is a company you might be aware of and you might not be. So it's a social-based app, so really based around neighborhoods. If you live in a particular part of, I'm just going to pick Leeds, LS6, where I was a student, you can only speak to a certain number of people around there in your geography. Now, I was brought on to help the business raise some money. They wanted some international monetization. In America, they'd been after a certain type of brands and they'd had some success there. Now, in the UK, I went after the same brands because it's advertising based, right? And very quickly, I realized I was knocking on these doors and I just wasn't getting the right signals back either. And I thought to myself, okay, what am I going to do at this point? Because actually the hypothesis wasn't working and what had worked elsewhere geographically wasn't working here. And it was a variety of reasons. The business just hadn't grown to the same number of users. I'll leave it at that. So we couldn't go after the big brands. And I thought to myself, we have a fixed period of time. I had 6 months to prove international monetization so they could go and raise some money in America on the West Coast. And I just thought to myself, okay, this isn't working here. What do I do here? And then I think a very simple thing is if you're lucky, you've got a go-to-market plan because you've got a reference point. So you might be pivoting at that point. But I just thought to myself, okay, who are the other customers? What do I need? I need money and decisions pretty quickly. And I thought going to the big brands takes a lot longer, bigger businesses, bigger cycles. I thought to myself, why don't I actually go to some tech-based businesses who are mid-market? And mid-market just means a mid-sized business. It's an American term which is used here in Europe as well now. These businesses have budget. They make decisions really, really quickly because they are growing as well. So it's an interesting, isn't it? Because we're kind of talking to startups here, but I was actually chasing startups who were just further down the line and it really worked. It really worked. So the business for Nextdoor here took off with mid-market. I went after broadband businesses. Broadband was really big. It suited the nature of our proposition and our pitch. And that's something you can kind of come on to later on because Nextdoor was all about the house. People were thinking about certain things. And if you're thinking about broadband, it kind of made sense. And I was just so pleasantly surprised. I sit here and it was a very simple thing. Just take some time. If things aren't working, and I always say, if you're banging your head against a brick wall, your head starts to hurt. And it's that kind of message coming back to you. Just stop, take a pause, and just take some time to think about it. And if you've not segmented your potential customer base, do that because it's not homogenous, right? The world in the Western world, we roughly break out, and actually probably across the world, you got your enterprise business, you got your mid-market, and you got your SMEs, what we call SMEs here, SMBs in America. Enterprise, I'm not teaching everyone to suck eggs, take a lot longer. Big brands have much bigger budgets, right? And there's less of them. It's almost like the pyramid. Then you've got the middle segment, the mid-market, lots of businesses, a bit more established. These are the ones who I think can be good in that early stage because they've got cash, they've been around for a lot longer. And then you've got the huge segment, which is SMEs. Now, you'll probably know which ones are your target audience, but sometimes you might find that actually your target audience straddles two of them, and sometimes it can straddle all three of them. So I think it's just, don't be too fixated on that one segment. Sometimes you have to go knock on our different doors.
Yeah, one thing we're seeing a lot now is, especially in our mentorship programs, is that there's a lot of people who feel like they've built a brand, right?
Yeah.
They've got a brand which is doing well, and they've got a personal brand, but it's all about the numbers of followers or the numbers of subscribers. And that doesn't actually translate into revenue. And I see a lot of people now struggling with that. So let's say you're somebody who built a strong brand, you're well known in your industry. How do you then go about actually converting that to revenue? So you've got those users maybe on your app, but there's just no monetization there.
Okay, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? Because success sometimes is measured nowadays through these social graphs, right? And it is lovely to have lots and lots of different followers. I'm just going to kind of, I suppose, bring this into an example of mine here. On one of my businesses that I've started up recently, which is well-being, I haven't focused that much on social. Funny enough, my wife and some of my friends have said, why aren't you doing that much there? And I said, it's going to come. That bit's going to come. Actually, what I'm doing is I'm actually focusing on the customers that I need. And then I'll build my social kind of graph and my following in tandem there. Look, if you're the people that are following you, right? Let's just take it through the social lens here. If you think they are your potential customers, then the messaging to them has to be very specific. And again, this is on the proviso that you think these people are going to convert into paying customers. Now, again, I just don't, because it's a very broad question. It can just depend on your product or service. If you don't think they're your potential customers, they just happen to like what you're doing, then you need to kind of pivot a little bit. Again, I'm using that word because you just need to turn around and think, I need to look somewhere else. And at that point, again, I'm very, very strong on your go-to-market plan. When one starts a business, has an idea of who is going to be spending money. And actually, it's not just about the money, it's about this product and service. Who is it going to serve well? Who's going to get value out of it? Because that's how you get long-term customers. And I think you just need to take that pause. You need to take that pause. And then you need to put a slightly different mindset on and think, actually, maybe we're moving out of this marketing phase because actually we've done well. If the brand is recognized and, you've got to check something. Do people actually understand what that brand translates into the proposition? And the proposition is about, like Nike, make good trainers. Are you a runner? Do you want this for a lifestyle? We all understand that. And I'm using a very clear and big example here. Do people understand that with your business? And if they do, then I think normally, if you've got that right, naturally, if you're just taking that moment, you should be able to identify who your customers are. If you can't, if you're getting stuck, and I would say this, hopefully you've got some mentors or you've got some people who are outside of your office, outside of your business. Because, we use words like echo chambers when it's just, let's say there's 5 of you in your startup. You're living, breathing the same oxygen day in and day out. And it's very difficult to get perspective. Perspective comes when either you step out, you raise yourself above it. But when you're doing this almost 24/7 in those early stages, it's very, very difficult. Someone else who you trust can come and take a view, and you then pose that question to them. I think this is where we're stuck at this point. And it's almost like I kind of see it as not your escape route, or it's sometimes you just need to pull that cord. We need some assistance, and it's going to come from externally there. I think that kind of makes sense. And I've seen that in some early stage businesses. Sometimes it might be, if you're at that stage VCs, sometimes it might be the people who've given you a bit of seed as well because you've trusted and they have vested as well. So they can come in and think they need some help here.
I guess following on from that as well. So sometimes there's the time for experimentation, sometimes there's time for, we've only got 1 month left of runway, a big client has just pulled out, what the hell do we do? And in a way, we had this earlier this year. So we were expecting 2 big partnerships for this year at the beginning of the year. And that was meant to be, okay, we've got this much money, we start buying things, we start moving office, get a new office, all these kind of longer term expenses. Then when that revenue doesn't come in, we then had to try and figure out something new. So we came up with a little Patreon program, and we enabled people from the community to essentially donate to us. And that didn't really work. There's a few people that did that from like the kindness of their hearts. What we then did is pivoted a bit more to smaller partnerships in a way. So there's patrons who are businesses who, by being a patron, they get advertised in our newsletter, they get advertised on our website, and that one had more success. And that gave us enough runway to get the other partnerships over the line.
Right.
But that period, like January and February this year, was very stressful. And it was, like I said, where you're just starting to panic and you're trying to think about, okay, we need to make payroll, we need to make the office. And obviously you're going to be in a situation like that yourself over time, like throughout your career as well. What did you do in those moments where you said, obviously, if you can have a mentor, you can pull the cord. How else can you go about that? How else can you think, okay, we're going to run out of money. What can we do?
It's great. And, you know, what I hear from you, actually, which is the most important thing is, you know, you rolled up your sleeves. Because you know, look, we know that you've got a product, you've got a service, as you know, this whole kind of entity that you have, and at that point, you put most of your focus on to the commercial aspect, i.e., you need to generate some revenue, and you know, and at that point, in most of the early stages, you've got to have your blinkers on because you've got to have focus. And you know, we talked about this earlier as well, Amardeep, and it's really, really important to have at that point, you've got to take the blinkers off, and for want of a better description, you have to just sit around a table and think, where else might we get some money? And what this is just lateral thinking, because all all you're really doing is, we were going to get some money from there. This is a profile of a type. It could be a bank. It could be a different type of organization. It might have just been a very large bank in some instances, right? And for whatever reasons, it's not coming from there. So you know the type of customer that it is. So you think laterally, who else is like that? Who else is our service going to deliver value to, and where it's going to make that connection? And I know I'm kind of laying it out quite simply, but there's no magic. You know, we all know there's no kind of silver bullet to any of this stuff. So you just got to be able to just say, but one of the things is, do not panic, right? Because the moment we start panicking, everything goes out the window. Sometimes we stop being nice to each other within the team because the pressure's coming down on us. Do not panic. You know, it's a golden rule of being in any tight situation. You just need to stop. And if you are panicking, you know, I'm doing some well-being stuff at the moment. Go and find some online resources which just help you with your breath work. I would, you know, I know it's a crazy thing for me to do, but if you can't find the calmness within yourself, because most of this is going to come from you and your team members, you just need to take a minute. And I'm a firm believer, just take a few minutes to pause, because if we start running around like headless chickens, all manner of craziness is going to happen. And maybe it just becomes too crazy as well. But taking the pause in life and in business is really, really good. And start thinking laterally, because there's going to be people out there and there's going to be customers out there that you will find. And the reason you'll find them is because you believe in your product. And you've probably stress tested, is the messaging right? Was the messaging right? Or did people not get our proposition? But you've probably been through those short little cycles if you got to this stage and you had someone on the hook, a potential customer. So continue to believe, but just take a couple of side steps and look around and think, who else might be out there who can make a quick decision.
So you mentioned about you obviously working on wellness as well. Yeah. And right now you've got 2 tracks, right?
Yeah.
You're doing both the business side in the tech world and also the business side in transport at another company as well. And you mentioned that it's because of the stage you're at the moment where that makes sense and that can work for you. But for like earlier stage people, how do they work out how focused to be versus how many experiments to run? Because say, for example, for us, right, we've got a million different things going on.
Yeah.
And that can then put us under a lot of strain, which maybe makes us less effective at each one. But at the same time, how do you learn if you don't iterate and do experiments? How do you gauge that of when people in those early stages, how to make a good decision about, should you be experimenting with this, or actually is this a no for now and we have to focus on this instead?
That is a really, really, I think it's a tough question, because, you know, one could draw up a weekly timeline, right? And one, from a Monday to Friday, one could record actually very high level what we're spending our time on as a business. And you might want to do that. You might be that type of person. There've been times, and I'm going to use a real life example, where I've had a very large sales organization across Europe. It's, I don't know, 70 or 80 people. And we can see that efficiency isn't there. And you draw up a timeline because you just want to actually see what's going on. You might want to do this actually, but it's about backing horses, to use a different kind of, a kind of an analogy here. The horses that you really believe are going to win the race are the ones you're going to need to back. Now, there may be some others that you like, but you're going to have to put them to the side. And, I'm bringing enough all these equine thing in because someone had said to me very early on, the blinkers are really important because our peripheral vision can distract us. And with the blinkers at times, it means that you keep this focus on what you want to do. So in this instance, maybe it's quite, maybe a practical way of doing this is that, you almost draw a circle and think, this is the core stuff or the core bits of our offering where we're going to make money. And here's the stuff on the edge where we might explore from time to time, but actually this is the stuff we're just going to continue. Now, if you've got some investors, right, and you're having a board meeting with them, you want to be talking about the core because they want to hear from you that this is what you're backing, this is what you believe, and this is what's actually going to take you from 0 to 1, or it may be from 2 to 3. And you just got to keep, and you got to believe in it. And you got to believe in it. Now, there might be some movement and some jiggling around in that core kind of area. But when you leave that core area, there's got to be a specific reason. If I was an investor and I'm talking to you as a founder, you're like, actually, we've been doing this. This is where we put most of our R&D, and this is what we believe in. But actually, we're going here. There might be a signal. You've heard something from a customer. Someone else has said something to you. Have you tested that out? But I think to be more succinct, I would probably be thinking, if in an early stage startup, that, you've got to be spending around 70 to 80% on the core, and the rest of it is experimentation. So as a guideline, that's how I would summarize it.
Hello. Quick interruption to let you know a bit more about Bay HQ. We're the community for high growth Asian heritage entrepreneurs, operators, and investors in the UK. You can join us totally free at thebayhq.com/join. There you'll get our CEO structure in your inbox every week, which is content, events, and opportunities. You can also get access to our free Startup Fundamentals course by joining. Let's get back to the show. So also looking at that as well is that I see some in pitch decks, right? Where people say, okay, we've got 10 different monetization models. And it's okay, if 90% of your revenue is coming from one of those, the rest are irrelevant to an investor, right? It's like they don't need to know if you're making 2% of your money through this and 3% of your money from that. And I think a lot of people miss that as well because they're trying to shake and say, look, there's so many ways we can make money.
Yeah.
But actually what it looks like to an investor is like, you don't really know what you're doing, or you're not really sure about your path. And sometimes, well, I think people shouldn't be afraid to do this. It's okay. From where we are today to until we raise our next round, or until like in this kind of phase, our main revenue model is going to be this. And then later, our revenue model is going to be this, because it's like, as we grow, it's going to change, right? And that's totally fine, right? Lots of businesses change their revenue model over time. But trying to say, okay, we're going to make 5% of money from advertising, 10% from subscriptions, 20% from this, 20% from that. I think you just lose a lot of investors because they just don't really understand what you're really good at. One thing as well, obviously, so you obviously worked in-house at like lots of different companies.
Yeah.
And then you've also worked as an advisor and people as well. What are some of the mistakes you see as an advisor when you go in, where people are thinking about growth and their strategies there, that you've seen across multiple different companies that hopefully some of the listeners can avoid?
Okay, I'm just trying to think through some of the biggest ones and some that we probably experience as startups as well. I think this concept of spreading yourself too thin, because, in an early stage, if you're going to investors, you might think, actually, I want a broader story which might appeal to more. People don't want to hear that. People just want to hear the core of what you're doing, the proposition that resonates with you as a founder or founding team member to the broader team. And I want to hear the passion, and I want to hear everything, the authenticity coming out on that Now, you might, as a sideline, say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're focusing on, and we really think for the foreseeable future, whatever that phase is and however long that time period is, this is what we're going to go after. But we do believe that there are some kind of peripheral areas which may be of interest, and we're just going to touch on this for a very short period of time, just to let you know that there is opportunity maybe to expand. And if you frame it like that, then people understand. So most of what we do in life is about communication, right? It's about, you sat there and you might be in a pitch, someone's attention span is so small, they just need to hit the headline facts. So always be really, really succinct, always be really focused on that core messaging. And sometimes if you don't talk about the peripheral stuff, it doesn't really matter, because people are going to buy you for that core proposition. So I think, for me, it's about not coming out and, throwing the kitchen sink at everyone, because not everyone's going to understand. If there's too many, if there's a line between my two fingers here, and the core of what you're selling is over here, but you're actually talking about this point, this point, this point, what you're actually doing is you're confusing the audience. People's attention span is too short. Be really, really, be back the core of what you're doing, and don't talk about the peripheral stuff. If you think, certainly if you don't have a lot of time, and if you're pitching against a bunch of other businesses as well.
And looking at the growth side of things, right? So trying to get more revenue.
Yes.
What are some of the mistakes people make on that side? If they've already got their funding, how do they maybe misuse those funds?
Oh, wow. I could use so many examples. Don't go and spend your early stage funding on nice to have stuff, which, happened. I was around in the .com boom at the turn, in 2000. I left EMAP, big media company, done 5 years there, helped them launch a startup, went to a Goldman Sachs business. I'm not going to spend too much detail. We had an office in Jermyn Street, and at the time, it was the most expensive office in Europe. I arrived there and I thought, my God, this is luxurious. This Jermyn Street is by Piccadilly, and it's where all the big members clubs are from hundreds of years ago. Don't spend your money. Look, everyone knows this. Don't spend your money on all those nice stuff. It's nice. Maybe go and have a nice celebratory drink or a meal, because you do need to mark these events and get the team together and get people to feel good, right? But the feel good factors do not come from material things of having really nice office chairs and all stuff. You've got to look after all that. But it actually comes from feeling good about how the business is doing. And that is sometimes a bit more ethereal. And I say ethereal because you can't touch it. It's not about nice tables and all the rest of it. The money has to be, if you're getting into the stage where you're about to commercialize, you yourself are a founder, or you might have a CTO with you. Do you have a commercial person? Do you have a person who really understands how to take the offering, believe in it, and then evangelize? Because some of this is about evangelizing. We use these words, and this word really came through in the .com boom, because we were going out and trying to sell technology which actually the world wasn't even ready for. And the reason this tech startup, the first one I went to in 2000, it was backed, it had taken a huge amount, tens of millions. The industry we were going after, they just weren't really ready for it. Concept was great. The product was amazing. That's a slightly different situation. I think, in this day and age, hopefully, that rigor of creating something always has happened. So to your question, I would question, are you yourself the right person as a founder to be able to go and evangelize and take this out? So if you've got some cash and you're thinking to yourself, how are we going to get maybe some test customers, or we've actually got some test customers, how do we actually grow our customer base? Have you got the right person to do that? So you might think to yourself, actually, do I get someone in? Now, you might get a consultant in who comes in for 1 day a week. There's many ways to do this, right? Or you just see some real talent in, maybe someone who's been at a uni for a couple of years. Doesn't have to be uni. It could just be someone else, who's at a certain stage in their career. Huge amounts of energy, because you need energy to do this. You need a huge amount of resilience, because the number of times, even with the best product in the world, you're going to have people say no to you for a variety. They might just not like your trainers when you've walked in, right? Who knows what that is? But, maybe someone's taken umbrage with that, and don't take it personally, because you're going to have to knock in a lot of doors. In sales, nothing has changed. It is a numbers game. You've got to build your pipeline. You've got to talk to a huge number of potential customers out there. And then as the funnel works down, bunch of them are going to be right. It'll resonate for a few of them. And that's how you start to get traction. But back to the point, are you as a founder or one of your co-founders the right people to do that? So maybe you want to spend some money in getting some help in with someone who can do that for you.
I think it's always such a challenge because you, especially say science startups or where the founders are very technical, is people fall in love with a product, but not think about, are customers willing to pay for this? Are people actually going to buy this? And like I said, they can spend so much time in building a really good product, and then they kind of, it's almost the money side is almost a dirty side to some people, right?
It has been in business for a very, very long time. Look, I'm very open about this. You know, I was really early on in the days of advertising. Now, without advertising, most of the services would not be available. Look at Meta at the moment. In Europe, they offer a ad-free model, right, where you can do subscription, and they're about to test it in the UK. It's not worked in Europe. People aren't paying for these services. So there is this value exchange. So I saw this in the early days of the internet. And the reason why the internet was not making money, because there was no ways, you know, everyone, all the publishers were online, but they were making no money. And it was like, what happened? Search advertising, where I was very, very early on, suddenly became this, I mean, I was going to be honest, this business, eSpotting, which was a UK-based business, purchased and backed into NASDAQ in 94, 95. We were printing money because we'd suddenly found a way. But as my wife has always joked with me, she says, you're one of the people, I'm not going to use the expletive. I don't know whether we're allowed to swear on these or not.
Swear,
Okay,
yeah.
she said, those fucking annoying ads that are always around. And she used to say it half jokingly, but it was a truth. So you've got this push and pull. And I understand, you know, I studied science in university. When one comes from a discipline and one builds something, it's like one's own baby. You almost don't want it to be sullied with anything else out there. And making money sometimes can be a really dirty word. I think people are going to get over themselves. If you are, I'm just going to use the example, you know, if you're a scientist and it feels so foreign to you, then that's when you need someone to come and help you. Because if you've obsessed about your product, and I'm going to use this word, the next stage is you're going to have to obsess about your customers. And I use it in a positive word because your customers you have to build a relationship with your customers. And you've then got to make that product or service really valuable. And that's a value prop and all the rest we talk about it. Because, you know, you got to look after your customers, right? It's no different to walking into a shop and buying some food and someone has got a look on their face and you're like, do you know what? I quite like your food, but I'm not getting the right vibe there. I'll actually go and buy something which is not as good as this because I actually want to feel valued. We all want to feel valued. And this is not just about business, right? In our relationships with our family and friends outside the business, it's the same. People buy people. So maybe it's just that you're having to move into a different phase and also recognize if it's not, you're not going to be the person to do it. And I think it's very hard for founders to do that because, you know, you have built this baby, which is beautiful and it looks magnificent. It's working and all the code is there and everything's great, but there's no customers. There's no one buying it. It's a common challenge.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's one of the things I think sometimes you get this mixed signals from social media, from LinkedIn and stuff about saying how the founder has to be the person, But it is looking at the founder might have a really good skill set, but that skill set doesn't make the actual money. And like you said, it's being honest with yourself is that if you feel sales is a dirty word and you don't want to be doing that, then either you let your company go bust or you give up your ego and your pride and you say, okay, let's get somebody in who's going to focus on that. And it could also mean that you then do the side of the business that you're really good at.
Absolutely.
So getting that person on board frees you up rather than you doing sales really badly. Get somebody else to help you on that side. And then you can spend all your time in the stuff you love.
Well, and also, you know, even though you're a founder, your conviction as you're pitching to a potential customer might not come through. And that would be a real shame for you as a founder because you might have someone who's helping you do that, right? Who's actually doing the pitching and then they invite you in because, you know, the chances are you're probably going to go to most of these meetings and these early stage meetings. You can be the founder and that's your role. And you've got someone else who's kind of teeing it up, getting the customer excited, raising their desire to a point, and then you get introduced as a founder, and then actually your story sound so much more authentic because you're naturally going to exude all of that great stuff and your own narrative of why this business was created. And you're kind of going to be introduced very naturally. And you're not going to feel like, oh, I'm not doing a sales pitch here, because you've built your own narrative that I'm not that person. Now, narratives can also change. Now, if you're 2 or 3 of you and you can't hire a salesperson, the other bit of advice I'd give you is that and you use the word ego, which is really important. Our ego is built by ourselves. We have built a narrative about our own self since we were born. If I was to ask an average person on the road, who are you? Most people will say, I am this person. I come from here. I come from this part of Bristol. This is what I like. And this is what I do. But that narrative is purely your own. You can change the narrative and challenge yourself. And sometimes you might have to do that. And you know what you're going to be doing? You're going to be rolling these sleeves up and you're going to say, I am going to have to do something else. And I'm going to have to believe in it because I have no other options. Because as you say, the runway of cash is about to run out. And this business is too important to me. And I believe in it so much that I might wear a different hat and I'm going to go and do something. And it might actually feel good for you to do that because you're learning from the coalface and get that real feedback from customers about what's working and not working.
I think one of the worst things anybody can do in pitching or when a founder's in their business is asking for permission. So it's like when they're talking to you sometimes and they're not telling you that their idea is good and they really believe in it. They're trying to see if you believe in it. And when you do that, it's straight away just, even if you have the best product in the world, if it feels like to me that you're asking me to see, like, is this a good idea? You should know it's a good idea. You should have that conviction in yourself.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a big skill that a lot of people have got to learn, because even if you get a salesperson on board, like you said, if as a founder, you're going to have to talk to people eventually. If you can't bring across that energy of like, yeah, we're doing something good here. We've got a great product. We've got a great team. If you can't say that and sound like you believe it, it's just such a red flag.
Do you know what a bit of advice I'd give you? Luckily with so much content available on the internet, there's TED Talks. There are, I can probably provide some links of some very, very good, what I would call sales leaders who help you find your own kind of comfort in that space as well. Because not typically commercial and salespeople are seen as more outgoing and just find it. And I think there's some truth in that. These people generally can walk into a room and just find it easier to go and shake a hand, introduce themselves, and there we go. It's almost like the pitch has started, even if and the really clever ones don't do it as an obvious pitch, right? Because they're the ones who understand the subtlety, can read the room. And we all have different skill sets. Some people are just much better at actually coming up with a concept and coming up with the most amazing product that other person can't do. So again, if you're in a tight situation, you don't have the resources to go and find that other skill set, just go and learn a little bit. Get yourself out of your comfort zone. And maybe you've got some friends who aren't in your business and you might just have to ask a favor. And, you're probably going to have a broader network in the business community and say, look, I'm stuck at this stage. Can I just do some role plays? With all the sales teams that I have built with taking new products and services out of business, all tech-based, like any sports person, like anyone else, we have always done role plays and we practice. So you and your founders, you might be doing it with them. It might be your partner at home, or it might be a friend, and say, you're going to have to sit there. Can you understand what I'm saying in plain English, even though this is a tech-based startup? And they should be able to say yes or no. So as we know, we have to move out of our comfort zones. And if you're a founder, co-founder, you need to be very comfortable that you're going to move out of that comfortable situation at some stages. And this may be the point that you have to do that.
So just before we go to quick fire questions there, you mentioned about building sales teams. And obviously when you're trying to grow and scale rapidly, at some point you're going to need to hire.
Yep.
How do you go about that decision and how do you hire the right people?
Yeah, really good. Reference point is, what's your culture? What is the feeling in your business? I just feel so blessed that I have built some amazing teams, and these teams are now friends. And because they were the right culture, they were the right fit, they performed, they engaged. But I'm going to fast forward a little bit. These are the people who make up your network as you grow and through your own career. There's going to be times when you need a hand. There's one group of people who are always going to help you. And this is this network. And I call this the kind of close network that you've worked with. When there is a team that is working together and sometimes, playing together outside of work as well, that strength, it's just like your own close friends. I mean, most of these people are my very close friends now over the decades that I've worked. I go and visit them regularly, the ones that are outside London. We meet up for drinks and all of that. So back to the point, these people have to fit. I would rather interview 20, 30 times to find the right person. I never, ever, ever. And I've only learned this because I was lucky when I was working for a company called EMAP. I did a lot of recruitment. It was something called a milk round, which I don't even know if it exists now. Yeah, I mean, I was kind of I just had a knack for people, and I was born to a pretty young age to be part of that team, to bring loads of people in. Some of that, as you get older, becomes instinct. You know the people who are going to fit with you because you can look at the CV. You've got LinkedIn now as well. Great. So you make that first pass. I think on paper, online, that looks pretty good. And then you got to trust your instincts. I always trust my instinct. Instinct is a odd thing when you look at it in a scientific and psychological basis. Instinct really is based upon the experiences we've had on life. It's not like someone was born with great instinct. Now, I'm not going to mention a politician on the other side of the pond. He used to say in his last term that, I'm going to base this on a gut decision. And when a psychologist look at it, so that you've got to have some experience in doing this. So just base it on your life experience. But obviously you do the first part, which is, do they meet the job spec and all the rest of it? But only hire the best people you can afford. And are they going to fit in your culture? Because if you do that, there's longevity. These people are going to hang around with you. They're also going to be invested in the business, and they're going to feel it like you feel the business as well, which means that you're all aligned and you're going to be successful. So do not hire in a hurry.
So really enjoyed this chat. We're going to go to quick questions now.
Great.
So first one is, who are 3 British Asians or Asians in Britain you think are doing incredible work, and just shout them out?
Okay, all right. Some of these are very obvious, but I'm going to tell you why. I think Sadiq Khan has taken a huge amount of flack because I think personally, this is just my view, he's been trying to do good. I'm a Londoner, born and bred in London, live here. I just think he's been trying to do good. And sometimes when you're trying to do things which great with people who may be just thinking about themselves, and I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, pardon the pun here, but the point is that I just think it's trying to make London a cleaner place. There's a lot of people who suffer from asthma. We know, after living here all my life, what happens with too much carbon monoxide being out there. So I think being brave and being of Asian descent, and it can be of anywhere from the world, right? I'm just picking because that's where he's from. I think he's been brave, and I've seen stickers on back of vans and cars with really negative messages about him personally. And I think to put yourself in the firing line and take tough decisions is great. There was a DJ, I'm a DJ, I've been DJing for many, many years, and Young Singh, who I love, and I think there's not many Asians on the DJ circuit, and certainly global. And I also like the fact that he plays eclectic music. He might be playing UK garage at one point. I saw him at Glastonbury a couple of years ago, and then he obviously brought some Punjabi music, and my mum was born in Punjab, so I kind of love the Punjabi music. I don't listen to it all the time, but when it's mixed in with a house set, it just feels great. And, I'm so happy for his success. And again, to see an Asian out on the global circuit. I had 2 others, and I'm just going to quickly reference them because I don't know which one I'm going to go with at the moment. Depending on which one. No, who I'm going to go with? I'm going to go with Nish Kumar, who's a presenter and comedian. The man is funny. Take away he's Asian or not. He is deeply political. And he has taken a lot of flack as well because he sticks to his guns. He calls people out. I almost think he's like a journalist as well because he does straddle that with some of the programs. He picks deeply political topics and then he goes for it. He goes for the jugular. And it feels uncomfortable. It's a bit like Ricky Gervais comedy. If you like it or not, some of these people say stuff which has to be said, and most of us are no good at doing it. But if you can deliver it in a way with a bit of humor, it challenges what's going on. And we need people like this challenging the status quo, and everyone else is in power because everyone needs to be challenged, right? We all do. The 3 Asians doing great stuff.
Awesome. And then people want to find out more about you and what you're up to.
Okay, right. So I help tech businesses grow. I mean, growth is my key area. You might want me in an early stage to get a go-to-market strategy together. I love helping businesses. I mean, I still get a kick out of it. I love startups. They really are. For years, all my friends have said, don't you just want to go and work for a big brand and you can leave at 5:30? I'm like, if I feel something, back to instinct, I feel it, and then you kind of back it. So I help businesses. You can find me on LinkedIn, basically. So that's what I do. Kind of like 2/3 of my week is consult and help businesses. I started a business called Good Vibration. I've been meditating and doing yoga for a very, very long time. I realized 10 years ago, corporates need some way of helping their people to manage their mental health, and certainly seeing what we've gone through in COVID, right? So I trained very luckily with Deepak Chopra and his team to become a meditation teacher. I also do sound healing as well. So on Insta, maybe we'll put a link up. It's just called the.good vibration. I also organize parties in North London, and that's something else called Saturday Social as well. But we'll put some links in there, man. Apart from that, I just wish everyone good luck, and you just got to keep going and believe in yourself.
And is there any way the audience could help you?
Yeah, you can get me in to come and do some sound baths with you if you feel like you need. I mean, some of my programs on the well-being side are geared towards corporates. You could do that, or you might want to just hire me because you need to get to the next stage in your business. Yeah, that's how you can help me.
So thanks so much for coming on today.
Pleasure, man.
Any final words?
Final words. Yes, be authentic. I know we hear a lot about it, but through the lens of being someone Asian, maybe, the number of times I sat in meetings and I felt like I'm the only non-white person there, and it doesn't really matter, right? But, I've been around a business for quite a while. Sometimes I felt uncomfortable, and I thought to myself, do I have to fit into this context? And I've just always thought to myself, I've grown into this. But if you're slightly younger and you're earlier in your career, just be who you are. People only want to buy you. Now, if that person sat there doesn't want to buy you as who you are, as the authentic person, don't sell to them. You'll find someone else who will believe in you. And that only comes with authenticity. And the other thing with authenticity is that it's the truth. It's actually who you are, what makes you up. There's nothing else there. Just believe in yourself.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.